Shalom, guys. Welcome back to another episode here at YASHAV Youth Ministries. Thank you for being here again. My name is Alexander Hernandez. I'm one of the youth leaders. If you like the content that we have on our channel, please like, subscribe. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please put them on the comment section down below. Also, if you have anybody, especially youth, that will be interested in listening to our teachings, please share and post on your pages, please, and get the message out that there is a youth that is thirsting for truth and to honor the King and the Creator of heaven and earth. Also, our congregation is integrated into Faith Life and Faith Life app. Right, our services will be streaming through there. I'll be putting the address to our congregation somewhere down here. And obviously, right now, because of the whole situation with the COVID, our congregation has put a pause on our services for now, at least for the rest of the month. But we'll be connected through virtual services. We'll be through the Shuba, Facebook, YouTube. So it'll be Casa Israel Yarah, and you can visit us there as well. And also through Faith Life and the Faith Life app, you'll be able to follow us there as well. With that being said, thank you for being here, and let's get started with this week's Torah portion. So, this week's Torah portion, it has two portions, and it's called Matot-Masei, right? And so, Matot means tribes, right? Here, Moses is assembling the leaders of the tribes to give them a message on behalf of Elohim. And the second portion of our studies is Masei, which means journeys off. So the journeys of Israel from the exit of Egypt all the way to where they are right now in Moab, about to cross the Jordan. So there's a lot to cover, right? Like I said, two Torah portions in one. Obviously, we're not going to be able to cover every single thing because, like I said, we don't have that much time. But today we're going to focus on basically the vows and oath a section, which is chapter 30, mainly the first 16 verses. And again, our goal, or my goal in my teachings and as a youth leader, right, in this Torah cycle, is to equip my youth with the moral tools that can establish them firm in their faith, that honor God, that the qualities that Elohim is looking for in his people, right? So we have here the vows and oaths to Elohim and the vows of minors and married women, the battle against Midian, the vengeance for Balaam's affairs. Moses rebukes the military leaders for sparing the female Midianites, the laws of koshering, war spoils and utensils, the division of war spoils, Reuben and Gad's request to be granted an inheritance on the east bank of the Jordan, Moses' objection to the request for fear of eastern tribes will defect from the western tribes, the clarification of the request. The eastern tribes vowed to send soldiers to aid the rest of the tribes in the taking the promised land west to the Jordan River. And in the light of these new conditions, Moses concedes. But right now, we're transitioning into the new generation, like the younger generation, right? The people that came out of Egypt have passed, and now this generation is starting to reestablish themselves in the camp, in Elohim's presence, in Elohim's order, right? Because that's what we're going to see now, especially in Deuteronomy, right? The next book that we're going to talk about, there is a legal treaty reestablished or re-edited, if that's the correct word, to the younger generations. Right, Elohim is trying to be clear before they cross the Jordan what they're supposed to be doing, right? And so in Numbers 30, right, it says the following: Then Moses spoke to the heads of the tribes of the sons of Israel, saying, This is the word which the Lord has commanded. And it says, if a man makes a vow to the Lord or takes an oath to bind himself with a binding obligation, he shall not violate his word, and he shall do according to all that proceeds out of his mouth. And then it says, also, if a woman makes a vow to the Lord and binds herself by an obligation in her father's house in her youth, and her father hears her vow and her obligation by which she has bound herself, and her father says nothing to her, then all her vows shall stand, every obligation by which she has bound herself, and shall stand. But if her father shall forbid her on the day she hears it, none of her vows or her obligation by which she has bound herself shall stand. And for the Lord will give her because her father had forbidden her. However, if she shall marry while under her vow or rash statement, her lips by which she has bound herself, and her husband hears of it and says nothing to her, on that day he hears it, then her vow shall stand, and her obligation by which she has bound herself shall stand. But if on the day her husband hears of it, he forbids her, then he shall annul her vow which she is under, and the rash statement of her lips by which she has bound herself, and the Lord will forgive her. But the vow of a widow or a divorced woman, everything by which she has bound herself, shall stand against her. However, if she bowed in her husband's house, or bound herself by an obligation with an oath, and her husband heard it, but said nothing to her, and did not forbid her, then all her vows shall stand, and every obligation by which she bound herself stand. But if her husband indeed annuls them on the day of he hears them, then whatever proceeds out of her lips concerning her vows or concerning the obligations of herself shall not stand. Her husband has annulled them, and the Lord will forgive her. Every vow and every binding oath to humble herself, her husband might confirm it, or her husband might annul it. But if her husband indeed says nothing to her from day to day, then he confirms all her vows and all her obligations which are on her. He has confirmed them, because he said nothing to her on the day he heard them. But if he indeed annuls them after he has heard them, then he shall bear her guilt. These are the statutes which the Lord commanded Moses, as between a man and his wife, and as between a father and his daughter, while she is on her youth in her father's house. So, it's very, very interesting what Elohim is establishing here, right? And so, this is basically a law of the time in Israel, right? It was a patriarchal system, meaning that there was a man head of a house, right? And so, in the culture, right, this is how things will manage themselves in a relationship between father and daughter, or husband and wife. Now, I want to focus mainly on the first verse, right? Because the first verse clears everything else that goes down from verse 2 to 16, right? And it says, if a man makes a vow to the Lord, or takes an oath to bind himself with a binding obligation, he shall not violate his word. He shall do according to all the precepts out of his mouth. So, what is Elohim telling us here? Elohim is telling us that what we say with our mouth, what we confess, right, whether it be our faith or whether it be a promise, right, especially in his kingdom, especially representing him, right? When we go around saying that we believe in Yeshua or something, when we say that Elohim is our Elohim, the vows and the words that we give will cause either a positive effect on our Elohim's image, or will it deteriorate it, meaning that the nations, right, or any other faith might hear you say something and not follow up on it, and they will question who you follow. You understand what I'm saying? Right? So this is an honorable statement, meaning that you have to be truth to your word, right? Yeshua told us, may your yes be yes and your no be no, right? You have to stand like Pinchas in our last week's Torah portion. He stood for Elohim, right? He was blessed because he decided to honor Elohim when nobody else would, right? In the moment where everything was going the wrong way, and the Midianite and the Midianite woman leader of the Midianites and the one of the Israelite leaders were going to dishonor Elohim in his presence, Pinchas stood for Elohim, right? His yes was yes and his no was no. He was not going to let them dishonor Elohim. And so Elohim is trying to tell this generation of the leaders, right? Remember, this is the younger generation, right? So this is the new generation in which next book that we're going to transition to is going to reiterate the covenant, right? Because they have to understand that when you say you're going to follow me, you have to hold yourself accountable to it. You're responsible, right? If you hold yourself to the covenant, right, you say, I love Elohim, I accept Yeshua as my Messiah, and you understand that there's curses and blessings, right? When you decide to dishonor Elohim, you cannot say, oh, demons are cursing me. No. You have broken a covenant, right? Remember, moral understanding, self-awareness is what we're trying to understand here, right? Elohim is trying to help Israel understand that you have to be self-aware of what you say, how you act, how you represent Elohim in the world. So, I found, let me see, 1 second. So, here, it says, a Torah portion for this week begins with Moses instructing the leaders of the tribe, saying, if a person makes a vow, he shall not break his word, but he shall do according to all he has said. Notice that the phrase break his word literally means to profane his word, which implies that breaking a promise is a type of spiritual defilement. If we do not honor and respect our words, we lose a sense of meaning, and the substance of what we say and think becomes unstable. Such double-mindedness leads to shame, since without inner conviction, we become inwardly divided and fragmented, so that we no longer trust ourselves. And being honest implies that we say what we mean and unified. An honest person does not play games with words, but understand that communication is sacred trust. So, it's very important that what we communicate to the world, and not only to the world, but to our family, our friends, right, our community, is accordingly to Elohim, right? Israel, right now, is about to accept a covenant renewal before going into the land, right? They're going to accept to honor Elohim, and they have to own up to that. And we're called to do that as well, right? We're called to, as we accept Yeshua as our Messiah, right, as our Savior, right, as our Redeemer, on behalf of Elohim, as the Prince of Elohim, our King on earth, right? As we confess our faith in His death and resurrection, we are held accountable to His teachings and His standards, right? And the main point that Yeshua has taught us is honor my Father's word. Okay? Understand that. We're held to the structure of the kingdom. We're not held to our own structure. We're not held to our own opinion, right? We have to understand that we have entered a new way of living, and we have to pay attention and be self-aware of what we say and how we act, because We're no longer representing ourselves, right? That's what the world teaches us. What the world teaches you, that you are you, and you can be great, and you are going to put yourself over everybody. Elohim tells you, you are great in my kingdom, but as a unit, as a group, as a body. I want you to work and be great with your people. Make the community grow. Make your family grow. Don't focus just on yourself. Focus on everything around you, and how can you make the world or your community a better place so that we can honor Elohim and represent him correctly. Right? Faith is just, it's not just saying I believe. Faith is an action, right? Once you say it, you step and make a step to acting on your faith, right? It says, we must be careful with our words so that we do not mislead others. Very important. This is called, in Hebrew, Shemirat Halashon, or guarding of the tongue. Yeshua warned us not to make formal oaths, but instead to be trustworthy in our words. Let your yes mean yes and your no mean no. The Talmud agrees by saying that no is an oath and yes is an oath. Our words are to be regarded as sacred, as an expression of truth. God has made us inevitable promises, and we're never to play games with that. Just as his word is sacred, so we should strive to be sacred in our speech too. Right? So that our words meant something, right? What I can make a deal with somebody, or I can make a business transaction with somebody, and my word was valid, right? And nowadays, sometimes words are not strong enough for people to trust you, right? Many people don't trust your word. They need to see a piece of paper signed. They need to see that you did it. Until you do it, your word means nothing. But to Elohim, your word means everything. He wants you to keep your word. If you confess your faith to him, he wants you to honor it at all times. It says, the Torah states that you shall not put a stumbling block before the blind, right? And you can find this in Leviticus 14. In addition to its literal meaning, the word blind figuratively refers to a person unaware of all the facts and who is therefore made vulnerable. Someone misdirects the blind and deceives them, and this violates the 9th commandment, not to be false witness. Such a deception is called genevat da'at, or stealing of the mind, since it defrauds the other person's trust. For example, it is common practice for politicians to disclose only what they think others need to know, and therefore they offer incomplete versions of truth for the sake of their own self-serving interests. Lying to others is a violation, then, of both the commandment not to steal and the commandment not to bear false witness. The righteous person hates to lie. Right? So here, it's telling us something very important that I taught in my class, and is that for you to be able to help the world, right? Because we're called to be a light to the nations, right? So we're supposed to be a representation of Elohim's kingdom in the world, right? So if we're meant to be a light to the nations, the way that we're going to do it is not so much by going out to the world, right? Like I've said before, and calling people to repent, to yell at them, to point out their mistakes, because we all make mistakes, right? We cannot spend our time of teaching people the word of Elohim by yelling at them that they are doing something wrong, because we're all growing. Now, the very important thing is that when you say, I keep the Sabbath, you keep the Sabbath. When you say, I keep the feast, you keep the feast. When you say, I follow the commandments, you follow the commandments. Because your word is going to show the world that you're real, right? It happens to me as especially the beginning of my walk, is that I made a drastic change in faith, and what I did was that I told them, I'm following the Sabbath. And they knew that I wasn't going to negotiate my job with the Sabbath. Either it was, I'll keep the Sabbath or I'm not coming, because I honor my king, right? Elohim gave me everything I have. And so the least I can do is honor the word that I have said that I believe in. I believe in the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so if he tells me be here on Shabbat, I'll be there on Shabbat. If he tells me be there on the next feast, which is Yom Teruah, Yom Kippurim, Sukkot, I'll be there honoring him. So the world knows, oh, where's Alex? He's honoring the God of Israel. Because that was the word that I gave. That is the way that I represent my king. Right? And there you will be a light. But if you say you believe something and then do something different, you become a stumbling block, because they say, aren't you following the Torah, right? The Torah is the truth, right? It's the heart of Elohim. So when you say the Torah is the truth and this is what I follow, but then you dishonor Elohim by not obeying his commandments, the person that is doubtful of what you believe in, instead of seeing light, they see a stumbling block, because you contradict yourself, just like every other religion that does, right? That is the difference between our practice, right? Our practice is there is a cultic side to it, right? We pray, we worship, but there is a lifestyle, right? We don't just live Shabbat, right? We follow and honor Elohim every day of our life. And on Shabbat, we rejoice that we do this every day, and we're given another day of life every day, right? So it says, deliver me, O Lord, in Psalms 120, verse 2, it says, deliver me, O Lord, from my lying lips, from the deceitful tongue. The sages say that the virtue of eminut, or trustworthiness, begins with learning to trust others. Parents are therefore responsible to fulfill their commitments to their children, right? And it's very important that we understand this. This is to the family, to the group, right? Fathers and children. There is an important strength in the core of family, and how strong, especially the man of the house, is willing to establish his family in the path of the Lord, and how the youth will be able to honor their fathers, right? A very interesting thing that we see here in this next generation, and that we see in the book of Deuteronomy, is that my personal question is, why does Elohim have to reiterate himself in the whole book of Deuteronomy? Why does he have to reestablish the commandments? Why does he have to repeat it? Why does Moses have to repeat it? Right? Why do they have to be circumcised? Why weren't they circumcised in the desert? Right? And it's because the parents, the ones that had died in the desert, did not fulfill their function, which was when they were in Mount Sinai, right? And they were given the 10 Commandments, right? And they couldn't handle it no more, because the power, the glory of Elohim was so powerful that they couldn't understand it. They said, Moses, you speak to Elohim, and we will do whatever he tells you. There, the leaders of Israel, right, that came out of Egypt, made an oath saying that they will honor Elohim. They will honor his word. They were bound to it. Let me see. I have this book that I use to study the numbers, and there's the JPS Torah commentary by Milgram. And there is a interesting thing he says here. It says, the common denominator of oaths, vows, and dedication is that all are statements that invoke the name of the Elohim. There are two types of oaths: assertory and promissory. Right? Assertory oaths are taken to clear oneself of a charge. For example, in a misappropriation, appropriating property. Right? So, Exodus 22, verse 7. It says, verse 7, if a man gives his neighbor money or goods to keep for him, and it is stolen from a man's house, if the thief is caught, he shall pay double. Right. So this falls into the assertory type of oath. Also, Leviticus 6, if I'm not mistaken. It says, when a person sins and acts unfaithfully against the Lord, he deceives his companion in regard to a deposit or security entrusted to him, or through robbery, or if he has extorted from his companion, or has found what was lost and lied about it, and sworn falsely, so that he sins, is regarded to any one of these things, and many may do, then it shall be, when he sins and becomes guilty, that he shall restore what he took by robbery, or what he got by extortion, or the deposit which was entrusted to him, or the lost thing which he found, or anything about which he swore falsely. He shall make restitution for it in full, and add it to 1/5 more. He shall give it to the one to whom it belongs, and on the day he presents his guilt offering. Then he shall bring the priest his guilt offering to the Lord, a ram without defect from the flock, according to your valuation for guilt offering. And the priest shall make atonement for him before the Lord, and he will forgive for any one of these things which he may have done incur guilt. So this is a false oath, right, where you steal something from your neighbor and you falsely say that you didn't, right? Then there is promissory oaths, the more prevalent type that impose an obligation upon the oath taker, right? So promissory oaths are the most prevalent type, and it imposes an obligation upon the oath taker. For example, the reputed one made by David, that Solomon will reign after him, and you can find that in 1 Kings chapter 1 verse 13. And a covenant by definition is a promissory oath, right? So a covenant, by definition, is a promissory oath, right? Meaning that you have an obligation to honor Elohim, right? If you say you're in a covenant with a God, right? If you say you believe in Elohim, right? If you say that you accepted Yeshua as your Savior, you are in a covenant, and you are held to the oath that profession of faith holds itself to, right? And so, for this teaching, which is very small and simple, but remember, before we get into the fun stuff, right, the super details, the mystic side of it, we have to understand this. The younger generation is about to enter the land, and they have to understand, just like we have to understand, because we're still in the wilderness right now. We're not in the promised land, and Messiah has not come, so we're still in the desert wandering. So we have to understand what Elohim wants for us right now, morally. How are we going to be an example of Elohim's kingdom right now? Let's keep and stay true to our word. Let's stay true to Elohim, just like Pinchas did, just like Moses did, just like Abraham did, right? Just like Yeshua did. They stayed true to their faith. They weren't worried about what the nations were doing wrong, right? Yeshua didn't come to the world and said, the Romans do this wrong and they do that. No. Yeshua said, listen, my kingdom is not from here. But what I'm going to tell you is that it will be here. And this is how you live. Obey my Father's commandments. Do justice and righteousness. Be obedient. Listen. Be slow to judge and quick to listen and obey to my Father's word and to my teachings, right? We have to stand for our word. We have to stand for something, right? right? We stand for many things in the world today. Who is really going to stand for God? That's my question to you. Who is really going to honor God and show that there is a true living God on earth? Thank you for watching. If you like I said, the content that we have on our channel, please like, subscribe. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave it on the comment section down below. Thank you. You have a great week. Shavuot Tov. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you.